Hey, everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast here on a Wednesday. Dan Labbe with Lance Reisland, and we continue our Football 101 series here. And today we're going to focus a lot on the defensive side of the ball. Now, all these questions came from our football insiders. That's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved in that. But before we get to the defensive side of the ball, Lance, we did get an interesting question from our guy Tom in Middlebury, Connecticut, one of our regulars. He says, when drafting players, is it better to take the most talented, best available, or better to take a guy graded a little lower who's a better scheme fit? And this is an interesting question because I think we had this discussion at the quarterback position a lot this year. What are your thoughts on that approach?
Well, Tom, Dan's heard me say this a bunch of times. I go back to one of my my ultimate cliches here in football, but it's players over plays. It will always be players over plays. However, if the coach is unable to kind of adapt, we saw that with Deshaun Watson. And once again, when Deshaun Watson came from the Texans, he was elite in what he did. What he was elite in what he did, though, was not a fit for Kevin Stefanski's scheme, right? And as a coach, I was always told you have to adapt to your players, and you do. Because especially at the high school level, when I was coaching, you only get a certain amount of kids. And in the NFL level, it's the same thing, though. However, I will say this to defend Kevin Stefanski, right? You only know what you can fix. Right. We all know. I know every scheme from the wing tee. Like I said on our last pod, I was watching 25 snaps of tush push. I love watching football, but I can't fix everything in football. I can only fix what I know, the schemes I run, because I've run them for so long and I know how to fix them. And this is the same thing for NFL coaches. They just know more than the rest of us, right? But there's still a point what they know. However, you're gonna lose if you don't have good players, right? Especially at the NFL level, right? So you have to make sure that all the positions are covered. But if there's an elite generational type talent, I think you have to go out and get that guy at times, because you win with players. You don't win with schemes. You don't win with coaches. Coaches make it happen, but when I used to speak at clinics, when people would say, why is that play really good? Coach, you run that play really good. Well, it's the same play I've run really for all my life, but the two guys doing it, they're really good, right? The play's not good when the players it's not as good. I mean, and I don't mind saying that, because that's the reality of it. Players are the reason you win, not plays. So if I have a chance to now, if the gap is really, really close, right? So if you grade a guy who's just a hair below, and some days you think he's above and some days you think behind, which I've had a lot of those guys, right? I've had a lot of those guys when I break them down, I go, man, these guys are close. Well, if it's 1 and 1A, then take a guy who fits your scheme. That's just smart. But it has to be really close, in my opinion. If there's a different separation, big separation in talent, take talent. I'll take talent every time. If I have better talent than you, I think I can win, because even if he does it wrong, he's going to be better than your guy.
Some of it is kind of position-based too, I think. Like at receiver, for example, I could just take a really small, fast guy and make it work probably. If we're talking defensive tackles and I have an attacking scheme, I don't want to take a guy that's just a big fat guy that takes up space in the middle, right? I want to get a guy that fits what I want my defensive tackles to do. So I think sometimes it can be by position too. And there is a reason that we say, like, oh, that was such a Pittsburgh Steelers pick, or that was such a Baltimore Ravens pick. It's okay to have that identity and to have that type, especially at certain positions.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the Ravens, that's a great example, right? The Ravens take those defensive tackles who are 380 pounds, right? They don't move very well, but they're a two-gap team. They're an odd front. Same with the Steelers, right? So you want those big guys that just take up space. Those guys don't. I will use an example. Alvin Thompson, I have nothing but praise for. He does what he did with the Browns, what he does very well. He stopped the run. He made two people block him. He protected those smaller linebackers, the Browns. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He fits better in a Ravens scheme than he does in a Browns scheme or in a Pittsburgh scheme, because that's what they want. They want you to hold up on the line of scrimmage, have multiple people hold on to you, right? That's where you get the defensive line holding, where you see those defensive line grab the guard. That's what it means. He's trying to release those backers. So it does. You're right. If you go to a high school level, if you're a 5'10", 210-pound guard, you're not playing in the Big Ten. That's the reality of it, right? There's no, it's not because you're not good. It's just the reality of, you have to grade it. They have to match your scheme. But in the end, I will say it to everybody, and I think everybody will agree with me. If you have better players, you win more games. It's very, very simple.
Okay, this is one that I don't think I sent to you, but I know you're ready for this. We're going to go through Jim Schwartz's defense here and kind of go through level by level. This was from Tom Bays in Charlotte, North Carolina, and explain what he wants out of each level of the defense. So let's just start at the very front. defensive tackles and defensive ends. What does Jim Schwartz want out of those guys on that defensive front?
Well, first and foremost, he wants them upfield. Regardless of what it is, he wants them to get off the football. So if you go down and watch the defensive line like I do, they work a ton of drills, and we call them get-off drills, where you're just reacting to the football and getting in the gap, right? The other difference is, like we just talked about with Dalvin Thompson, what gaps are you in charge of, right? So in a lot of defenses, defensive linemen can be in charge of 2 gaps. Or the linebackers are fast to one gap, slow to another gap. You hear the term scrape, etc. The defensive linemen are trying to create absolute madness in the backfield. They're trying to get multiple people to block them. They're trying to blow their gaps. So if Mason Graham is lined up in a 3 technique outside the guard, he's going to blow B gap. He doesn't have to worry about A gap, right? If Shelby Harris is in a 2I inside the guard, he's going to blow A gap. Right? He's going to take the gap, we used to say, through his man. But there's times he's just going to blow the gap too. He's just going to try to create bubbles in the backfield, right? This is the same style defense that my dad run. And you can get beat at times, but you're trying to cause havoc in the background, right? That's what the primary job of that defensive line is to do, is to get off the football and create madness in the backfield by penetrating gaps.
So when we talk about Mason Graham and kind of what he did at Michigan versus what he's going to be asked to do with the Browns, how different was it?
Well, everybody should be really excited, because he was more of going back to what we said, Baltimore Steelers. He's more of at Michigan, he had a 2 gap a lot, right? What that means is there's A, B, C, D gaps, right? And you and I have done a pod, and we can do another one on the gaps if people have those questions. But everybody's in charge of a gap. Some guys are in charge of a gap, so it's like a linebacker being in charge of an A gap, and then he has to scrape, or he's slow to another gap, right? At Michigan, or with the Steelers or Ravens or multiple teams, or sometimes on multiple downs. That's how talented NFL guys are, right? So even the Browns occasionally will 2 gap. But what that means is that at Michigan, he was in charge of the linemen in front of him, and then the gaps to either side, right? Which means you have to be real strong and have a great base. Because if you get moved out of either gap, if you don't anchor in there, you leave big holes, right? That's actually harder to teach than it is to penetrate, right? So he didn't get to do that a lot. He didn't get to penetrate a lot at Michigan because of the fact now they got the 3rd down. They became exotic because they got some NFL coordinators at Michigan. But in the scheme of things, on 1st down, a little bit more than Schwartz, a lot more than Schwartz does. He's gonna basically hold on to that guy and not move, right? They're gonna go right there, and his job is not to move. Have everybody try to move him, and he's not going to move. That's an easy way to look at
it. Okay, let's move back a level and look at the linebackers. What are linebackers asked to do in this scheme?
Well, Dan, I steal your quote on this all the time. I laugh every time I steal. I do tell everybody it's your quote because I think it's a perfect example. They're covering.
It's fine. Kicks. I'm gonna trademark this.
That's right. They're covering kicks, right? And that's a great way to look at it. So if you think about, all right, so defense, it all ties in together though, right? So the defensive line is going to cause his havoc. They're going to make multiple guys block him. That's going to free up those guys. Now, again, the linebackers, instead of reading and reacting to a gap or reading or reacting to a double team or an outside zone, they don't do a lot of that, right? What they're saying is, once I read what I see, my hair is on fire, and I'm going to make tackles. That's why JOK was so fast, right? That's why Schlesinger, who led the country in tackles last year, is going to be very successful from day one, because you're not doing a lot of that. So if Schlesinger lines up at the mic, he's got a gap, he reads a double team, his hair's on fire downhill, right? That means you're not worried about anything else. That's my A gap. That means everybody else has to do that, right? That means the defensive lineman, if he was in charge of B gap, he can't get pushed over. He's got to take his B gap. It's gap integrity, gap rules, right? But instead of, reading and protecting my gap, I think, Schwartz uses the term, we're taking the gap. We're not protecting it. We're taking it. We're dictating. So that's what it is. It's covering kicks. I use it all the time. I think it's a great term because your hair is on fire downhill going to make tackles.
So let's keep moving back. Let's talk about the corners. How much are they in man? How much are they in zone? How does Schwartz like to deploy these guys?
Well, Schwartz likes to play 1 high hats, right? So he has 2 safeties, and usually a lot of times in the NFL you see the 2 safeties deep, right? That's called 2 high hats. Schwartz likes to have 1 high hat. So that was Thornhill last year. It'll be Hickman right now to start, and we'll see what happens moving forward. But Hickman would be deep. Delpit's down by a line of scrimmage. So Delpit's kind of a hybrid guy who likes to make tackles. He has a lot of the linebackers, to me, are not really linebackers. They're second level. So you're breaking it down perfect. It's the first level, the second level. Delpit's going to be a part of that second level. Then the third level. Now, the secondary is going to tie into the defensive front and the linebackers, and they all have to work. It's got to be a dance, right? So if you're getting massive pressure up front, you win on first down, you create these second long, now you get to turn it loose, right? So these guys get to get the wide threes, wide nines, and turn it loose. So the Browns are going to be one high hat, and they're going to be in a lot of man coverage, and they're going to try to take away quick throws, and they're going to try to take away those quick throws because there's just a minimal amount of time. The ultimate on a three-step drop, you're thinking between 2.5 to 2.8 is kind of what we used to say. Well, I'm not going to give you the slant. I'm not going to give you the hitch. I'm not going to give you that easy throw. I'm going to take that away, make you hold the ball. Because I won on first down, now we get to turn it loose. We stop the run with the linebackers. Now the secondary plays man. Now they also play, it'll look like man, but it's cover 3, which are in charge of zones. But they play even that a little bit more aggressive. They kind of play a match cover 3. It's a match quarters, which is an hour pod all on its own that we can do one day, but it's kind of a zone with man principles depending on what routes that the receiver. And that's actually a Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, old school, back with the Patriots kind of thing. It's an awesome film breakdown. We can talk about it one day, but it's regardless of the coverage, it's still aggressive, right? And that's the way you can look at it, right? But if you're going to be in man and you don't get pressure, you can get beat in man more than you can get beat in zone, right? So it all ties in together, right? It's a pressure-based defense. We're going to take one gap. We're going to stop the run. Then we're going to get in wide threes and wide nines, and we're going to come really, really hard and try to rush that quarterback. We're going to, more than sacks, we're going to try to speed up the quarterbacks. Hurries are more important than sacks, folks. Much more important. Let's speed up that clock of the quarterback, and then they're going to be in man coverage in the backfield. And you're hoping, going back to what you and Mary Kay were talking about, you're hoping that free safety can get over top and create some turnovers because that quarterback had to get rid of the ball quickly. They took away the short throws. They have to throw it deeper, and that safety can get there. They all tie together. But in a general rule, it's a pressure front. We're not waiting for the offense. We're going to dictate what we're doing.
How flexible are they with their safeties? We've talked about Delpit. I think he's best when he's down in the box making plays, but we'll see him line up deep sometimes. How flexible are they with how they deploy those guys?
Well, you have to be flexible because in the NFL, like you said, we talked about earlier, right? 12 and 13 personnel. So all of a sudden they come out in 12 personnel. They go regular personnel, Delpit's down in the box, and then they go nickel, right? So he's got to maybe drop back. So they have to be flexible based on formations, flexible based on motion, right? So if you get a strength to one side and Delpit's on the line of scrimmage, all of a sudden they motion and strength goes to the other side. Well, they don't run Delpit all the way over. So Delpit would go back to the free safety. Whoever Thornhill, he's got to come up. So that they don't always want to have Delpit down the line of scrimmage because if Delpit's always down by a line of scrimmage, as an offensive coordinator, I'm going to attack that. I'm going to go away from him. I'm going to figure out that's what those really smart minds are doing on offense, right? So you got to be flexible just because of what you see. But the foundation is let's have Delpit down by a line of scrimmage. Let's have a safety who can ball hawk and play sideline to sideline. Let's have corners who can play man. Let's have rushers. Let's have 6, 7, 8 rushers who can just turn it loose because they're fresh and we got depth, right? Look at what the Browns did. They got rid of Obo. They got rid of Thompson. Now they got 8, 9 guys who can play multiple positions. They're long. They're position flexible. So it all ties in. It all ties in, but they have to be able to rotate a little bit based on what the offense does and not get stuck.
Okay, so this kind of goes with we got a few like this, so we'll just we'll go with our guy in Ty in Montreal. A refresher course of the pros and cons of cover 1, cover 2, and 3, etc. And what do you expect to see the Browns playing most this year?
Well, the Browns will be in mostly one high hat, and you're going to get a cover 1, which is going to be the safety is free, right? So the safety is free. That's what the 1 is for, right? That means the cornerbacks, right? The linebackers, Delpit down box, they're all going to be in man, but they're down by the line of scrimmage just in case it's a run play. Now, the problem with man is that first of all, you can get beaten man one-on-one. Secondly, if guys have run responsibility down by the line of scrimmage and you get play action, they can get caught with their eyes in the backfield. So the strength of man, though, is that if I only have one safety, I can have eight guys down by a line of scrimmage, and I'm trusting my cornerbacks to cover. Now, if it's cover 3, it looks like cover 1, and that's the job of a secondary, right? They're going to make it look like what it's not. So what that means is that each secondary guy has 1/3 of the field. So the safety would have the middle third, and the 2 corners would have the deep third to their side, and the linebackers or the second level have the underneath coverage, which we call the flat coverage to the sideline, and then hook curl in front of the center, right? So if you think it's like it's every area is covered. The problem with cover 3 is, first of all, you're not aggressive, so it goes away from your identity. You often give up easy throws, right? The hitch. So you're bringing pressure, but you give up an easy throw. Who cares? You take the hitch, you take the slant, you take the speed out, right? So it allows throws underneath. One of the strengths of cover 3 is that you can now use your corners in run support. Remember, when you're in man coverage, if you're in cover 1, and I didn't say that, and I apologize, cover 1 you can't help in run because you got to cover your man. So your eyes are on your man, which is also the tell for the quarterback, right? If my eyes are on the receiver, it's cover 1. If my eyes are in the backfield, it's cover 3. So no matter what they show me, they're trying to hide stuff. Eyes don't lie. That's what we used to tell our quarterback. Eyes don't lie. So that's one of the things in cover 1. I don't have any run support from my secondary, so I better tackle second level. Cover 3, now those guys are going to be a little bit deeper, and they're going to be able to help in the run game. Same with cover 2. Cover 2, the 2 safeties have half the field. The 2 corners have the flat area. Underneath coverage is the same. Now, cover 4 is very, very simple. Now, they make it look like cover 2, but now each secondary guy has 1/4 of the field, cover 4. So what do you do as a defensive coordinator? If it's cover 4, my linebacker is in charge of the flat. That's a bad matchup against a receiver. But if it's cover 2, that's a bad matchup for a receiver because there's a corner sitting there. So what they'll do, they'll make it all look the same. But once again, corners and safeties don't lie, especially safeties. So if it's cover 4, the safeties are going to be more inside. Why? Because they know the corners are dropping deep. If it's cover 2, even at the NFL level, those safeties are going to widen because they have to cover half the field. So the safeties will tell you the story every single time because that's what ends up happening is because they know how much ground they have to cover. Now, the better safeties, they can make it look like cover 2 and still get over the top on make it look like cover 4. So they get way inside. Your quarterback thinks, oh man, they can't get over the top. Well, Ed Reed can come to the hash and get over the top, right? So that's the cat and mouse game. Now, some of the strengths of cover 2 is you have those corners in the flat for run support. So if you're having trouble set the edge, you can use those corners. The eyes are in the backfield. That means everybody can help with the thing. If it's cover 4, once again, you give up easy throws. But one of the strengths of cover 4, we used to call it sky, is that it's really hard to throw the ball deep against sky. There's 4 guys deep. And once again, it's based on who you have and things like that. But if you want to know coverage-wise what coverage it is, folks, look at the safeties. They will tell you, regardless of the coverage or if it's 1 or 2 high hats, safeties can't lie. We always tell our quarterbacks, they will tell you the story. The cornerbacks will lie to you. The linebackers will lie to you. Safeties don't lie. Safeties are the honest ones because they're the last line of defense. So look at those safeties, their alignments, where they're at. They'll tell you exactly what coverage they're in 100% of the time.
Yep, the safeties tell the truth. That's the old saying. This is a little bit of a throwback, and I don't know that it matters quite as much anymore in the modern NFL. When you look at the 4-3 versus the 3-4, do you have a preference?
Well, you're going to see more forefronts in the NFL just because of more of a base defense. The Steelers, that odd front or tight front. And the way to look at it, the way that it's pretty simple to look at it, folks, if it's a forefront, it means the center's uncovered. It's an even or a forefront. If it's an odd front, it means the center's covered. That's an easy indication as you're watching the football game. See if Posick is covered. If Posick is covered head up, and the tackles are covered, it's odd. If Posic's not covered or he's kind of just shaded, right, that tells you it's probably an even front. Now, for me, I like to work against an even front just because it gives you better double teams, right? You're going to get double teams with on a 2-eye, which is inside the guard, or a 3, which is outside the guard. An odd front or a tight front, you just don't see as much. And once again, even at the NFL level, I always work, and I see the Browns do it. They do it better. NFL guys are really good at it. But you have to work, all of a sudden you play 4 teams in a row and then you get to the Ravens. So for 4 weeks in a row, you've worked against the even front. That changes. If you see a tight front now, that changes where the double teams are on gap scheme. It changes who the double teams are on zone. It changes who the blitzing backers are. It changes who's covered, right? So all those things change. And you really, at all levels of football, you have 2 work days. Right? At high school, our work days were Tuesday and Wednesday. You go over stuff, but live is the only time it counts. Right? So you have to work on those things all the time. For me as an offensive coordinator, I love to see a forefront. I want to see a forefront and 2 safeties because I know what I can do. And more importantly, I know what I can fix. Sometimes that tight front, those defensive coordinators in a tight front who run it well, they're really tough because they can do a bunch of different things and they can create a bunch of havoc for you that you're not seeing on a weekly basis.
Okay, we're going to do one more really random one here. Look, I love questions about long snappers, so this is how we're going to wrap it up. Why not use a lineman or a tight end as the long snapper and free up a roster spot? doing some roster math here, Lance.
So this is a great one. This goes down to my neuroticism when I was coaching, right? So I used to love numbers. Special teams are all about numbers to me. And I used to tell my special team coordinators, if the special teams don't count, we win. And what does that mean? It means both teams played really well on special teams. They cross each other out, right? But at the high school level and at the NFL level, here's some great stats for you, right? If you block a punt at all levels of football, you win that game 90% of the time. That's a crazy stat at all levels. So you don't want to get your punt blocked, right? So and you're trying to block a punt. So that's the first thing. Secondly, look in the NFL. Last year, 67 games through week 8 were decided by 7 points or less. So that extra point field goal snapper has to be, that whole operation has to be outstanding. And those in football has become such an analytics. You hear all the time, right? Should we go for it? Should we not go for it? Those are numbers that those guys talk about in meetings. If we get a punt blocked, we lose. I said it every week as a high school coach. What are we doing in punt protection? Do they use their defense? Do they bring it all the time? Do they go safe? What are they doing? If they're a punt block team, we're working on that on Saturday morning after our Friday game. Why? Because if you get a punt block, you lose. It's really, really simple. If you lose points, so let's say you miss an extra point and you miss a field goal. Well, there's a lot of games decided by 3 points in the NFL. So that operation on both punt and extra points have to be perfect, right? The only time you hear about the punt team is when a punt blocked. The only time you hear about a kicker getting yelled at is when he misses a kick. It's not always their fault. It's that long snapper. That operation has to be elite every single time. And when you get guys who are tight ends and linebackers, they're doing other stuff all practice. They're doing linebacker stuff. Their hands are beat up. They're real sweaty. Maybe they just ran a route and got absolutely labeled by a safety in the middle of the field, which is what we used to have. That's what high school coaches. I remember running routes, and our receiver, who was our best athlete, was our punt snapper. And I remember he'd run a route, get killed, and we didn't complete the pass, and he'd have the wind knocked out of him, and I would have to use a timeout because I know if I get a punt blocked, I lose the game. So that goes back to the coaches, right? The coaches are saying, we don't want to deal with that. That's got to be separate. We got enough to work on. Go do your thing. There's not a better life than be a long snapper, be a kicker, be a punter, because those guys are working by themselves, because that has to be a non-negotiable for a head coach in the NFL.
And I talked to Chris Tabor about this once, the longtime Browns special teams coach, and he was telling me about Charlie Hewlett, how they knew the rotations down to like a half a spin, how to get it to the punter, how to get it to it is a much more specialized thing than I think people realize.
No, absolutely. And the holder as well, right? That's why it used to be, if you look back going, even like Mahomes is holder, for all quarterbacks are holders, right? Because we have a red shirt on. We never get hit in practice. So we got extra time too. So we'll work on some holdings. You see all those quarterbacks working on where they're flipping the balls and stuff. That's because we don't get hit. Right? So the quarterbacks all know how to hold, but like you're saying, quarterbacks have a ton of other things to do in practice. So at every level, you can't really always do it at the high school. College level, you can do it, but that's tight too. But the NFL level, those guys are all specialized because they're working on that all practice. Those have to be automatic points. Regardless, extra points and field goals have to be automatic. Because if they're not, you lose football games, especially at the NFL level with every game, 67 games coming down to less than one touchdown. You better take those points, and they better be automatic when you take them, because that's why those guys are doing it. That's all those guys do all day. They better be good at it, and it better be non-negotiable.
Okay, there we go. Our Football 101 series here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Those questions came from our Football Insider subscribers. That's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that link. It's been fun. We're going to do a draft pod with you and Tim here coming up next week. So again, like I said, just get subscribed to those feeds. It'll hit your phone as soon as I hit publish on all of these. Appreciate the time, Lance.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.